Welcome to the Friday Fraudster podcast. Join them as they discuss sad, funny, and sometimes disturbing fraud stories. Be sure to catch past episodes on your favorite podcasting platform or go to www.fridayfraudster.com and grab some CPE while you're there.
Hey.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So welcome everybody to episode number 108. Hey guys, I got some fuel for thought.
Almost as high as the temperature today in Houston or a couple days ago. So, yes.
Yeah, it's hot by you guys, isn't it?
God, yes. Let me ask you guys a question though. When's the last time you actually filled up your tank?
Yesterday.
How much did it cost?
You know, I do this.
you just push the button and don't look, right?
You're gonna
No.
probably gonna hate me. It's probably been over 2 weeks, but I work from home.
Yeah.
And we don't use my vehicle that often because my husband's too tall to fit in it. So, and it cost me under $40.
Now, for that, I hate you. I mean,
That's convenient, right? How did you select your car?
wait, do you have a hybrid vehicle?
No, I do not.
What kind of car do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
A Lincoln Nautilus.
Oh, okay.
So I get about 21 miles per gallon.
That's not bad. Yeah, okay. So I tell you what,
I'll think.
I filled up my car today, and somehow I feel like I needed to take out a loan just to put gas in my car. I looked at the thing and it said something like $4 a gallon. I'm like, what the? Who? Wow. So here's what I want to know from anybody watching right now. How much are you paying per gallon to put gas in your car? So now, here's the other question that I have for you all. If you've ever had a company purchasing card, have you ever made a mistake and purchased something for yourself personally on your company purchase card? Have you ever done that before?
I am my own company, so all the time.
Christine, you're on mute. Christine, I think you're still on mute. Christine doesn't want to admit actually purchasing something. She went out and purchased Christine purchased the Louis Vuitton teddy bear on her company's purchasing
teddy bear. I think I've had one corporate card. I don't like the idea of having a corporate card for a company that I'm working for as their auditor. I don't like the thought of that. I've never done it, but I've seen it happen where people have accidentally made charges.
Right.
But the policy would always address how they would reimburse on the submission form.
Yeah, right. And where the items clearly, they describe what you can and cannot purchase. Right.
Yes.
So, yeah. So the policy was pretty, clear cut, right? Black and white. This is what you can, this is what you cannot purchase.
I've seen it anywhere from down to alcoholic drinks. I've seen one policy for a financial institution where it specifically said you were not allowed to expense more than 2 alcoholic drinks per night while you were traveling.
Oh, wow. Most of them say none, but they would give you at least 2.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're in really, really crazy parts of the world doing audit,
Well, okay. I can see that. Yeah. Well, I was thinking maybe the work environment was so toxic and they knew it. So they were just giving you some sort of something to medicate yourself to be able to cope. That's what I was thinking, but okay.
I've also seen it where it says none. I've also seen that.
Okay. So now Hal says gas is down from its peak prices. Yeah, it is, but it's still expensive. Stephanie is saying she fills up at Costco and it's $3.65 a gallon. I remember when gas was like 75 cents a gallon. That was when I first started driving, it was something like 75 or 82 cent a gallon or something like that.
Actually, what? Oh, wait a second. 99 cents. It was 2016 or 2017. 99 cents a gallon.
Yeah,
When,
yeah, that sounds about right.
when the previous president was in the office or took the office, I remember someone posting it on Facebook. I only remember this day because, various reasons. But yeah, I remember it was 99 cents. I was like, oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, sounds about right. So look, and I'll tell you. So I remember one time I actually used my corporate card on accident at a fast food restaurant. The total was like $1.35. You know those Chick-fil-A waffle fries? Those things. Oh, I just had to have some. But as soon as I recognized I did it, I went in and I wrote a check without them even having to be alerted by it. So I guess it happens, on occasion,
Mhm.
sometimes.
Pull out the wrong credit card.
Yeah, pull out the wrong credit card and you inadvertently make a purchase using your corporate credit card.
Mhm.
Now that brings us to today's story, where in the city of El Paso, apparently city representatives are having issues with gasoline purchases on their corporate credit cards. And so, you guys, this one, we aren't going to keep you long because this is quite interesting. In 2022, the auditors went in and looked at fuel card usage. The internal auditing department went in and looked at fuel card usage, and they realized that one of the representatives, her purchases amounted to what was close to 35% of all fuel purchases by the entire El Paso City Council using her city gas card.
Mhm.
It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. But
Scared
then
a
it got
little
even
bit.
better though. From January to April of this year, she and her husband, wait, her husband, was he a city council member too? Okay, wait. She and her husband had fuel purchases that amounted to about 40% of all city council fuel purchases. What do you guys think about that?
Reading everything, because I read the ones that you sent us, and then I researched some more. Because then I like looking at social media pages and stuff like that. Is it bad? I don't know if she really thinks, I really think she doesn't think she did anything wrong.
I'm with you.
Like, she honestly believes it.
Okay. So let's get into what Christine is talking about. Okay. Uh-oh. Just lost the page here. Hold on one second. There we go. Let's get into what Christine is talking about. So when the internal auditing department did their investigation, in one instance, they found that a fuel purchase was made on the card while she was in a city council meeting. They pulled the police report where there was security footage showing that her husband fueled and refueled a vehicle multiple times. Now, that was a second vehicle. So they had two different vehicles that were being fueled and paid for using the organization's company card. These findings were presented to the Financial Oversight and Audit Committee. After some discussion, and actually before that happened, she actually agreed to pay some money back. So she paid back $6,700 for the 2022 incident. However, she claimed that they didn't break any laws and that there were, quote unquote, other forces at play here, meaning that people were trying to possibly set her up.
I didn't do anything wrong, but here's your $6,700 back.
Yeah.
Am I being too mean and thinking that just doesn't make sense? I didn't do anything wrong, but here's your money back.
Yeah, that that does sound a little bit funny, right? Now, Jules is saying my company's policy does not allow gas purchases and requires the IRS mileage rate to be used. Yeah.
My internet is a little wonky today. I'm so sorry, you guys.
You're
Hey,
good.
no worries. No worries. And Benita is here.
I'm
I've
gonna
seen.
log into my phone.
I don't know who was it that just said about the mileage. I see a lot of that being used. The only other time I really see gas purchases being put on like a company credit card or something like that is if it's a company car or if they have a rental vehicle. That's when I've usually have seen it. I used to work for the state of Wisconsin. I was not one of the employees that had to use the state vehicles or anything like that. But each person that lived within the vicinity of Madison, they did have an assigned gas card, but that gas card could only be used on that state vehicle.
Right. Yep.
So it kind of makes me sit here and think, state vehicles aren't going to be Ford F-150s, or they tend to be small compact cars. So I think as an auditor, if you did do data analytics, you would be able to pull out receipts for outliers, people that are making $80, $90 fill-ups, which I'm guessing her husband probably had, because wasn't his vehicle a truck?
I believe so. Yeah, yeah. Now you make a good point. So, all right, today, guys, hang on tight because we're talking about the results of an actual internal audit. And a lot of people that listen are internal auditors. So let's dig in deep because Michael makes a really good point that piggybacks off of what Christine just said. He said, my question is, where were the checks and balances before the amount got that high? So I'm gonna tell you guys a story. So at one point in time in my career, I was director of audit for, well, a few organizations, but at this one organization, we had our own fuel pump stations. We had our own fuel pump stations. And what we did was we had dual key access. We had dual key access to the actual station itself and then to the pump that was required before you could actually purchase gas. Now, this was right before we had our last economic meltdown. And I remember going to the CFO and I remember saying to her, we need to do a fuel audit. And she was like, well, why? This was just my audit intuition. I said, when you look at gas prices, they have doubled. I think they had doubled at that point. When you look at gas prices, they have doubled, and you have people that are hurting and are desperate. Desperate times often call for desperate measures. And while we may not be looking for a huge dollar impact here, we're looking at the culture, and we're also just looking at theft, altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I liked about this place was even if she disagreed with you, she could understand your logic and she wouldn't try to stop you. She told me, she said, well, I don't think anybody here would steal from us. So I kind of disagree with you doing this one. However, I'll back you up and support you in it because you have a rational reason behind it. Oh, I swear that was a great place to work. So anyway, we looked at the controls surrounding the fuel pump. And we did find a few things, and we did have a few people that needed to pay back a little money. And once we turned the evidence over to her, I think she actually terminated some people. It's so long ago, I can't remember. And it really wasn't for the dollar amount. It was, like I said, it was for the principle. It was the culture that she had there, which was a really good culture. And she didn't want anybody there that would actually do what these people had done. But we did use data analytics to take a look at a few things. I'm sorry, if you filled your car up on a Monday, you shouldn't be filling it up again on a Tuesday, especially if it's a different vehicle that you're filling up and you didn't go out of town on a trip. So, to Michael's point, data analytics would have really caught this. The question that I have with this one is, how did they decide to look at fuel usage to begin with? Because they weren't doing data analytics, it's my understanding. But the audit department.
I think what they did is it was part of the audit annual audit plan. So I think it was the procurement card and the gas card that came up on the annual audit, and so that's what they've done.
Yep, I think that's what happened.
Yeah.
And then Hal brings up a good point. If fuel costs were much more than what was budgeted, which it would have been, why would it not be questioned and looked into prior to needing an internal audit to discover it? So now Hal is bringing up a really good point, because what Hal is talking about is simple management controls, management review, management, enterprise risk management, right? Whoever
Yeah.
is over the fuel function should have some key performance and key risk indicators where they should be monitoring it. That management should be doing some oversight of this entire process. So Hal brings up a really good point. I like this. Today we're getting into like internal controls and auditing, and but yeah.
It's making me wonder, was it year-end budgets? Did year-end budgets all of a sudden go, where did our gas money go? And then that caused, hey, we'll take a look at it. You know, was it just like, have the auditors take a look at it, and they went, well, while we're here, we might as well see where we're sitting for the first quarter of the year.
Yeah. So now this brings up another interesting wrinkle in this story, because I'm with Galena. I think from what I read, it looks like it may have already been on the audit plan. And it looks like that's the kind of stuff they look at year over year, I think, or every few years in a cycle.
Potentially not. No, potentially not. From what I was reading, after the findings, then the auditors were asked to go back and look at prior years. So I doubt, right. So it's kind of doubtful that this was an audit, that was annual audit.
Okay. So now one thing is the audit department reported to the city manager, which is why one of the city council representatives was also alleging, hey, there's some bigger forces at play here, because now they're trying to decide who the audit department should actually report to. And there's actually a proposition out on the ballot for the citizens to vote on as far as where the internal auditors should report.
Did that came before they reported that this gas came out, right?
Before the actual final report came out, yes.
Yes.
But not necessarily before the start of the audit.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the previous city manager was terminated. I couldn't find out why, though.
Was that Claudia?
She was not reelected. No, there's two representatives, right, that were part of this, the findings, that were singled out as part of the findings. And so one of them, the second one that did not get reelected, actually filled up the car on the day of her last day of the office. And so that made it into the report.
Right. But listen to the way one of the news articles actually words it, though. It says City Representative Brian Kennedy and City Representative Joe Molina led an effort that resulted in the termination of the city manager's contract on February the 28th.
Okay.
Very interesting. But yeah, you're right. The contract wasn't renewed, I think, because she wasn't voted in, but somehow they're saying that these two city councilmen did something. They weren't really clear about what. So it's a lot of speculation in here.
Oh, I just found something else about her. So the former Claudia, it wasn't that much further after the gas card scandal came out. There's still questions remaining about how she spent $7,555 in one day using a taxpayer-funded credit card.
Yes.
Mm.
You didn't give me that article, Robert.
I didn't find it until later on. So I do pre-show prep right before the show too, just to cover my bases, and that's when one of those came up.
So you guys want to hear something ironic that I found?
Ooh, what'd you find?
So Cassandra, the other one that paid the $6,700 back, I gotta pull it It was a couple of days, May 7th, 2023. She posted on her Instagram that she was giving away 50 $10 gas cards.
Oh, I missed that. Holy smokes.
Oh.
What?
And this comes after she stated Friday that she was going to pay back $6,700 after a review revealed the excessive spending. So I tried Instagram creeping on her, and she must have removed the post because it's no longer there. But in order to win, you had to like and follow her page and tag 5 friends in her comments.
Wow. Oh, wow.
I know, that's a lot for a $10 gas card.
Busy.
It was a $50 fuel card to 10 lucky winners. I'm sorry.
So,
wow.
okay. So now,
wait a second. Was this an official page, official Instagram councilwoman page, or personal page?
I think it's City Rep Hernandez is the one. And it said that they were going to be announced May 21st, but I can't find the post. And I might be overthinking it, but she needs to be careful about that, because if you're running contests, although it's personal, aren't there certain rules and stuff you have to abide by in certain states?
oh, I'm sure there are, especially if she's a part of city council. So I've got a question for you two and for everybody in the audience. So here's what I'm going to ask. Now, as an auditor, based on the things that we've just discussed, what would be your recommendation? And before you answer that, let's go to the audience for just 1 minute. So we'll give them a chance to overcome the 10-second delay so that they can type in some things. But Stephanie said she went to Disney. Now, if we remember, Kelly tells us that most people that steal, they do go to Disney. And of course, that's our running inside joke here. For those of you new to the show, and Hal said she drove there and back, which makes sense. That's why she needed to stop. And then Hal also says she was running an unofficial lottery and giving out city purchase gas cards. Oh, great ethics. Okay, so now back to the question I had. If you were the director of audit and this came up under your purview, what would be your recommendation? And there's a reason why I'm asking this, because I want to see what our audience is going to say, and I want to see what you two are going to say. What would you recommend happens in this particular case?
Go for it, Galena.
Like the recommendations after the audit, what should happen?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So my number one, first of all, I think that the audit was botched. I think that the audit was just, yeah, I think it was botched. They didn't take into account the policy that wasn't clearly, described what was happening. It wasn't black and white. So there's a lot of gray area. And so the findings, could have gone either way. And so even the councilwoman, the one that paid back, she's like, no one told me. I have not read anywhere. I mean, granted, you're supposed to represent people. You're elected by the people, and you're supposed to represent people. So do what's, more than just the law allows you to do, right? So ask questions, etc. The policy wasn't clear cut. The findings were like, we found you, and so what,
Yeah.
And it looks like they were not discussed with the people that were, that got into that excessive, so to speak, spending, right? It didn't sound like they were even spoken to about the report prior to the report coming out. So I don't know.
What say you, Christine?
I do like the idea of the IRS guidelines for paying back mileage. I mean, you could fudge things that way, but I think then that way that would require you to actually document the trips that you're actually taking. So they'd have to sit there and going, I'm going from point A to point B. This is how many miles it is. It's going to take somebody a little bit more work to maneuver that. Like Galena said, I don't think their policy was really clear. And I think that's what she called it out. She said, you didn't tell me I couldn't use it, and I'll of my vehicles in my house. And I'm sorry I took my husband's truck this day. And my only thing is it doesn't help her that her husband was on camera filling up the gas. That is the smoking gun of it all, is that, okay, even if you're taking your husband's truck, your husband was filling up the gas while you were in a meeting.
Yeah, but does the policy say that only the person that has the card can use the card?
I wanted to say it. Well, it just said, did it just say personal vehicle?
From what I saw, the policy was a cluster, you know what? It wasn't that clear. So now I think that Hal has the number one answer. All members of the audit staff get free gas for a year. Okay. I'm joking. Okay.
Hal, you and I need to talk. Yes, I'll reach out.
It's when we talk about policy, it kills me sometimes, because you do get managers, people on city councils, everything else. Everybody sits here and goes, but we feel so restricted. If we make policy too detailed, we feel so restricted by it. And sometimes I sit here and think, not everybody has common sense that would use that policy. So if you don't want it to occur, outline it in policy. You can always make exceptions to policy. You can always make exceptions.
Absolutely.
But once somebody crosses that line and you don't have it outlined, you can't give them repercussions just because they didn't have the common sense that you thought they should have.
Right. All right. So here's my next question then. See, we're going somewhere at this. This is a good, and you know what? I should actually, sometimes I give CPEs away for listening to these episodes. I'm going to set this one up as a CPE because I promise you, this is a really good lesson for us internal auditors. So listen, here's what, hold on. Let me find it. Give me 1 second here. Here's what the audit department recommended. The audit, and I'm reading this from one of the news articles. The audit recommends canceling the use of city fuel cards for the mayor and city council due to these findings. The chief auditor suggested establishing a vehicle allowance for elected officials instead. Now, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I'm confused.
Do you want them to keep the cards or don't you?
I mean, it's like they singled out. Who did they single out? They singled
the mayor
out
and city council.
Mayor,
yeah,
and the city council. But okay, all right.
I mean, well, here's another thing. Do you start restricting how many miles they travel? So it could be one of those things. I mean, could one of the other constituents sit here and be like, well, she's rerunning. So yeah, she did use $6,700 in gasoline, but she created that time. She had the time to drive around and get people to vote for her. Well, I didn't have that capability. Like, so do you just restrict it?
You can't get to that constituent because it's just over your mileage allowance.
Right.
So you can't go there.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's add a little bit more to this now. Both the people accused of misusing the card said that they were not aware of any restrictions, but the audit also revealed other irregularities, including missing signed statements of understanding from several officials. And they're saying that the potential violations could lead to misdemeanor and felony charges. Now, also, they're going to do an external investigation led by an attorney.
Sounds like internal auditors are not really friends with the city council.
Well, it was their Prop J that they were voting on. She was the only one that wanted it to stay, wasn't she?
Yeah, from what I can tell, she was the only one that wanted the dual reporting relationship for the audit department.
So it was making me wonder, did she have some connection with that city manager? And then that way, if there were any findings, would that city manager be able to stop it before it went to the committee? I can't really see that. or would they have the ability to modify reports before it went up?
Yeah. Okay. So now let's take this back to the original question that I asked, though. What would be your recommendation if you saw that there were some irregularities with fuel card usage based on using the organization's company credit card? And the recommendation that the audit department actually made was that they stop using the credit card for fuel purchases and that they give an allowance instead. Now, I'm not trying to make this extremely personal, but I'm really going to give you my opinion on this and show you where a lot of us auditors fail big time when it comes to being trusted advisors in our organizations.
Mhm.
The biggest thing that happened here was an auditor just made a recommendation that was now telling them exactly what to do. What to do is the management's decision, and completely missed the failure here. The failure is a lack of governance and oversight. We know that the policy was not clear. The policy, there needs to be a policy that clearly outlines the expectation. That's first of all. And secondly, whoever is responsible at that company for managing and monitoring the purchasing cards obviously have either no process in place to effectively manage them, or a process that failed because there were no warning signs that one group of people had over 40% of your purchasing card purchases when it came to fuel. That should have been a red flag that management should have caught before any audit would have. So governance and oversight are some of the things that we miss out on reporting as auditors because we dig too far into the weeds and try to tell people how to run their business. Governance and oversight are the things that we should be looking at, but are horrible at actually making recommendations on.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was very passionate, and I completely agree.
I wrote that down
Yeah.
for future reference, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this field a very long time, and one thing is we kind of take ownership of too much, because by telling them exactly what to do, when they do that and then someone steals, they're going to say the auditors told us to do it. The real problem is, if you are managing a process, how are you as a management team monitoring that process? That's your first line of defense there. The first line of defense failed, and you relied on the last line of defense to actually catch it. That makes absolutely no sense, and it puts too much onus on your back as an audit department.
Absolutely.
I like what
it didn't sound like they. It didn't
Go ahead,
sound like
Galina,
they
you're
went through the entire process, right? It didn't sound like the auditors went through the entire process of fuel purchase. What does it take to purchase the fuel, right? Where's the policies? The policy clearly defined. What is the process? Is there some kind of review? Is there some kind of reconciliation? That doesn't sound like that came up at all.
And that dovetails into what Hal said. What is the root cause? Because that's when you would have gotten into a process problem. So first it's governance. Is the governance adequate? Then are the processes adequate? Dovetails right into it. None of these require you to actually make a decision for management and tell them what the processes should be. But that is what we do all too often as auditors.
And this what I'm about to say might not exactly apply to this, but it made me think of it with Hal's comment about ethical failures. Yes, policy and procedure won't fix that.
Right.
And this is like the end result. What happens to the people when they do something at an organization that's unethical, that goes against your policy? How is management dealing with that? Because if you're going to set the standard that, all right, just don't let it happen again, it's going to happen again. And it's going to happen with more and more employees. If you're not willing to hold people accountable to those policies, that's another thing that we have to look at.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up, Christine, and I'm glad Hal said what he said. And I'm glad that we're getting here, because that goes back to the one thing that auditors should be auditing in almost every organization, but we rarely look at. And it's been the subject of a really good paper that Richard Chambers and Cynthia Cooper just put out, and that is culture. What is going on in the culture of the organization that allows all of this kind of chaos to occur? Because even if you try to fix the controls, even if you try to fix the policies, if the culture is corrupt, when people violate these policies, those that they like will get a slap on the wrist, and those that they don't like will be fired. And so you still have a broken process within the environment. So we're hitting on things that auditors, if we really want to be trusted advisors, things that we really need to hit on, and that's culture, that is oversight and governance from a management standpoint. And to Ursula's point, now Ursula said they will still ask for very concrete recommendations. They will, but we don't guide their business. We don't tell them exactly what to do. The true problems here are governance and oversight and culture. Look at the infighting that's occurring between these individuals here. It's obvious some people don't like other people for some reason. It's obvious that something in the culture is actually bad. Policies won't fix that. Now, procedures will fix you being able to catch things, but if the culture is bad, again, you're going to give people you like a slap on the wrist. You're going to give people that you don't like a termination, and it's still going to create an environment that is bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. No. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And follow up. Re-audit after they fix everything.
Could you imagine, though? Just think about this, though. Can you imagine you stop using purchasing cards and then you give an allowance, and then what happens then? Some people end up getting allowances and they don't necessarily spend all the money. And then the citizens say, why are we giving them allowances? We're just boosting their salary. Yep. Somebody on the management team has to make the decision on what needs to be done and needs to stand by that decision.
Absolutely.
So that you won't be able to say, the auditors said do this.
So isn't there, like, when you write an audit report, you write the observations, right? And recommendations, and then there's like a management plan of action, right? Where the management does chime in as to what is the appropriate in the under these circumstances for them, what is going to work, and when they plan to implement it, by what day, time, or whatever month, right?
So I'll tell you guys a secret. There are a few things that I've done in the past. I've actually produced audit reports with no recommendations from me. Now, here's why, though. Because I've worked well enough with the management team to where they had a management action plan, and embedded within that management action plan were things that we talked about. So now what looks better, if we notate the issues and then there's a management action plan that incorporates really good practices that we've worked together to help craft? Now you don't have the auditors looking like, we know what we're talking about and you should do this, because now the onus is on them. But here's the other thing. Another thing that I do, just a real good tactic, and I say tactic in a good sense of the word. I'm never going to just give you one recommendation. I'm going to say, if I use recommendations, you should consider one or some of the following, and then list 2 or 3 best practices, typically 3 best practices that you see other organizations do. Because here's what happens. If you list one thing, again, they're going to say the auditors told us to do it, and it's going to be your fault. If you list a few things, they may pick one, they may pick a combination of the 3 things that you list, or they may list a combination of the things that you've done, a combination of the things that they've independently researched. But at the end of the day, it's something that is directly from them, and it is feasible for them, and it is reasonable for them. So they're more likely to do it because the idea comes from them, not you as the big bad bully. And I'm not saying we are bullies. I'm saying we're perceived as bullies. So I don't agree with sitting here telling someone you must do this because we are the auditors. It is your department to run. It is your company to run. We are simply the people who are reporting the news and trying to help you, so we can give a few suggestions here or there. But giving one suggestion as if it is the law, you are leading yourself to failure, because they will blame you.
I know I like giving verbal examples. So not necessarily. So if they're like, okay, so how do I go about doing that? I'll say, well, I've seen it done several different ways. I've seen it done this way. But you could create your own. One of my favorite sayings is, just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. So just because somebody does it differently than what we've always seen doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Which is why I tend to shy away from being so direct, because you have to build a process that fits your organization.
Yeah.
And while we did come in and we looked at your processes, only you know exactly what fits your organization. So I focus
Yeah.
more on the management action plan because you have more ownership in that because you have written it. Now, Hal says submit for reimbursements after the money is already spent. If it's legit, it will get paid. That is a very good control. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. Absolutely.
is. But then the other thing we have to watch out for is rubber stamping.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a control.
Yeah,
That's a control.
And Hal hit it dead on the head. Thank you, Hal, for summarizing. You know what? See, this is why I keep Hal around.
Christina, so to
I'll
your
say stuff and Hal will summarize it so succinctly. And I'm like, why didn't I just say it like that? But Hal said recommendations are in private and then the management action plan is in print. You know what, Hal? I'm actually going to steal that because you just took my whole however, my 2-minute diatribe and just bundled it down to one sentence. That was just pretty cool. Thank you, Hal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is Stephanie again, hit it dead on the head. Multiple recommendations diffuse oppositional organizational behaviors. Oh, I like the way she said that too. That alliteration it rolls off the tongue. Anyway.
Yes. And at the end of the day, sometimes what happens is, when you force collaboration, right, is people are actually forced to go and speak to other cities, right? Mm-hmm. For example, right, is, hey, we had this finding. What do you guys do? Like, what is happening with your cards? Oh, we eliminated because of da 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 da, or we did this because of da 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 da. So it does foster, communication and partnership if you do it right.
And I have to correct myself. This person who said multiple recommendations to fuse oppositional, blah, 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 blah. That was Peter. And Peter, I'm not going to try your last name, man. I'm sorry. That was Peter from, I don't see where you're from though, Peter. Hold on. Now I'm curious to know who you are because I think you might be a first-time listener. Oh, okay. Peter is in Marlborough, Massachusetts, and he works for Joculus Enterprises. Pretty cool.
Welcome.
Yeah, yes. Hope you're enjoying it. The conversations we're having today.
Now, I really like this story. As soon as I saw it, I was like, we've got to talk about this one. This is really interesting.
It's when you think that the conversation can't get any deeper, we just keep going. I think that's what it is. Like, I know we've talked about people like with their Louis Vuitton teddy bears and their expensive vehicles and stuff like this. I mean, this is another one of those stories that I think Kelly would absolutely love because pink collar crime. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about something under 10 grand. Yeah. But it's still theft.
Yeah. Well, and
but is it though?
That's the hard. This is one of the hard
areas. Yeah. The hard part is it under 10 grand? And honestly, for me personally, it goes back to one of my sticking points, and it's internal auditors need to be looking at culture. And I'll try to drop a link to that report that Richard and Cynthia did in the chat later on, because I don't have it handy right now. But what they did was they laid out the reasons why internal auditors should look at culture and also a framework by which you could actually audit culture. Because I know for me personally, when I was a chief auditor, I embedded elements of looking at the culture into audits, but never a full-fledged culture audit, because I always got pushback when I said I wanted to look at it. That is extremely important because the culture in an organization is going to drive the internal control environment. It's going to drive the atmosphere. It's going to drive the behaviors of the employees that work for the organization. I remember I worked for one organization. I did a ton of investigations within a 2-year period of time. And one thing that people that worked there noticed, Hal just dropped it. I'll pull it up in a second. One thing that I noticed that people that worked there came to me and said was, whenever I investigated something, they noticed some people got special treatment. Now, here's where this is important. If you look at the federal sentencing guidelines, which dictate how organizations should structure their compliance programs, they actually say within that, one of the measures that the federal government is going to look at you and judge your compliance program on is the way you treat people when there are infractions. And there needs to be equitable treatment for equitable crimes. And I remember in one organization, I investigated something where somebody cost the organization $1.6 million, and he was allowed to retire with his pension. Now, somebody else in the organization, well, he just mismanaged his department, and the loss wasn't a whole lot, less than 10 grand, but he didn't directly cause it. He indirectly caused it by bad mismanagement. He was terminated. People came to me as the audit director. Hey, why is our company doing this? Why was such and such allowed to retire and such terminated? It creates an atmosphere where people notice and they are upset at what's happening in the organization. And for those of you listening, Hal just dropped the link to the report. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, because we have a worldwide audience here, come back to the LinkedIn show or go to my YouTube page. You've got to get the link and just read this report. It is a phenomenal report, and in my opinion, is one of the best research-based pieces of content that has come out regarding our profession in a very long time because of its usefulness and timeliness. Now let's go to Bob Wessler's comment. Bob says, I previously reviewed expenses, which included mileage that had to be supported by a map of the route. One of the C's submitted reimbursement for an offsite company meeting with a map and mileage to a location nowhere near the actual meeting. Oh, man. And it was approved. So that's speaking of rubber stamping. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but then it's like, what do you do? How many lines of defense can you have? And at some point, I mean, it hits accounting, but you can't expect accounting to go through every single expense report and judge it.
Yeah.
If it should be paid or not.
Yeah. And I think you make a very valid point. I think at the top of the house, though, so when you look at this particular situation, it looks like the governance structure was just missing. If you have the right governance structure and you have the right culture, here's what's going to happen. Stuff like this, the rubber stamping, it's still going to happen. But with the right culture, some people are going to speak up.
Yeah.
I could tell you a crazy story from when I was an examiner at the state of Wisconsin. I had gotten a letter. I got a letter because I over-tipped. We had a cap of 20% tipping for our meals. So I traveled a lot for the state. I over-tipped by 35 cents. I had to mail a check back to Madison to pay that 35 cents back to the state of Wisconsin.
Wow. And you know what's funny? I just laughed at that. However, you know, right is right, and it was a good control.
They caught it. Their controls are working.
Now, how much money are they spending on that good control is another issue, because there's a balance, right? That's the other thing we auditors kind of miss out on sometimes. There is a balance that has to occur.
Yeah. I had a coworker, she was working in the Madison office, and I called her. I'm like, can you just walk over to accounting? And so she went, and they're like, no, we can't take physical 35 cents. Christy's got to give us a check. Yep. So I'm like, I'm going to end up spending $1.50, the cost of the check, envelope. I got to put a stamp on it.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, when I said earlier I had to get those Chick-fil-A fries, that same thing happened to me. I actually didn't have a checkbook at that point in time. And I figured I needed to get one anyway, just in case. And so I had to actually go to the bank, order checks, get a checkbook in order to reimburse for something that was like $1.35 or maybe $1.75, however much the large Chick-fil-A fries are. Now, Hal has chimed in on the other comment he made. He said, if people have money already in their pocket, meaning if they get a stipend or expense for purchases, they are more apt to take liberties. If they have to submit it for reimbursement, that's a lot more work and less prone to abuse. Yeah. So
yes, I agree with that too. Yep.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Anyway, you guys, anything else? Anybody else want to say about this one? This has been fun. I like this has been a fun one.
You know what was another interesting finding that for me about the auditors? I mean, you clearly, I'm not a fan of those auditors. I'm not a fan of this audit report. I really am not, because just for reasons I already stated. But one of the other issues that was obvious to me is, they said, okay, so she filled out back to back, right? So back to back, etc. And her explanation was, I travel a lot to see my constituents, right? Did they go back to verify that?
Right.
Did they go back to actually verify that statement? Did they take a look at the mileage? Did they take a look at the number of meetings on her calendar? Where were those meetings, right? So take that step further. It sounded like they were quick to accuse of something that was very gray.
Right.
And she called him out on that too, didn't she, Galena?
She did.
Yes, she did. She absolutely did. Yes.
She did.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. I would do exactly the same thing. And that tells me, again, they didn't talk to her before issuing the report. Or maybe if they did, they said, no, we're sticking to our findings. Nope, we're sticking to our findings, which is also like, okay.
And I went on a lot of her social media pages. There's no negative comments on anything that I'm seeing. So either she's really good at deleting them, or there's a lot of people in her area that are like, she paid the money back.
Well, here's the thing. So let's add on to what Galena just said, because that's an excellent point. They are saying that the rules, the policies were unclear. Mm-hmm. First thing is, I didn't see where the auditors actually said they violated the policy, which means the policy probably is unclear. This actually could be a case of, since the policies were unclear, she did whatever she needed to do to make gas purchases happen. And in her mind, they could have been legitimate and still following the policy. As a matter of fact, in one of the articles, they say just that. They say, we don't feel like we had broken any policy. Now, it is okay for an auditor to say, listen, what someone has done doesn't seem like something we want our company to be doing. However, our policy was not adequate. And I talk about this a lot. Oftentimes as auditors, we audit two policies instead of looking at the stupidity within the policy. If the policy is stupid, you should have to call it out.
Yep. Happened to me quite often.
Hal says put a tracker on her car, make it a sting operation. But yeah, if the policy is dumb, you have to say something about the policy, because it's going to go back to the culture that is within the environment. Nobody wants to work in a place with policies that are stupid and that are prohibiting strong controls. That doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, that's a very good point. Now, Hal is saying we don't need a policy on ethics. If it's unethical, it's unethical. Yeah, I agree with that. But I think what they were saying was they don't believe they did anything unethical. So, yeah, I do agree with that, though. You can look at something. Hey, if this is not ethical, it's not ethical.
I mean, is that how a lot of our regulations come up through the government that way?
Oh, God.
Somebody found a new way of doing something. So nobody told me I couldn't do it. What's that saying? I hate the saying. Ask for forgiveness, not for permission.
Yeah.
I hate that saying. Like, if you're thinking that when you're doing it, then you know what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Either you know what you're doing is wrong, or you know that it's against policy and that the policy is stupid. Because some organizations have policies that are just dumb. Let's be real. And it's when they were first enacted, they may not have been, but what is it? I posted something on LinkedIn the other day. If you're not following me on LinkedIn, just follow me on LinkedIn, because I post some funny stuff sometimes and some good stuff and then some educational stuff. But I posted something the other day about in Alabama, I think it's illegal to have an ice cream cone in your back pocket. Now, today, first of all, who would want to put an ice cream cone in their back pocket? But today, That's still illegal, but it's stupid. Back in the day when it was first enacted, it was because people would put an ice cream cone in their back pocket to lure horses away from the horses' owners. Because back in the day, before there were cars, horses were your primary means of transportation. The horses would smell the ice cream and would follow these people back to their homes. So it was a form of car theft. It was a tool used in car theft. Now, today, with that still being on the books, that's probably a stupid law. It's probably a stupid thing to do, but you probably don't want to arrest someone because of it. So there are some laws, some policies that are stupid
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yep.
Because I said
Hal.
so it doesn't work.
Hal's making a good point. Back to Christine's original point. If she did nothing wrong, why did she pay it back? Now, I'll play devil's advocate here. Sometimes people end up paying things because it's actually cheaper to pay something than to go through the process of clearing your name.
That's true.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It just depends. Especially when you look at our legal system.
You know, Christina, to your point, sorry, Rob, jumped in. To your point, it seems like she has favorable, right? Favorable ratings, favorable appearance on social media, etc. So by her paying back, people like, you know. So
Yeah. But I will say, in general, I agree with this sentiment that you and Hal just expressed here. In general, but sometimes, why do you think some companies actually just pay people off when something happens? Sometimes the companies aren't guilty of whatever it is they're being accused of. It's just easier to pay people off than to go through the court system. But I think in this situation, yeah, you guys make a very, very, very good point.
I mean, it's either that or she could double down.
Now this
Double
is a good.
down, I didn't do nothing wrong.
Now Hal says, can you put an ice cream cone in someone else's back pocket? That's how you could frame somebody, right? Somebody you didn't like, just drop an ice cream cone in their back pocket, then call the police. This is illegal. And I agree with Bob. Dumb policies are often in place because somebody did something dumb. Yeah, that's very true.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of crazy stuff.
Oh God.
Yeah, I've got stories. I've told you that though.
That's why we're gonna have you back as guest host as regularly as we can. So you know what? This is pretty cool. Let's talk about this again now. Okay, so look, you guys know that Joe has a full-time job now, and Kelly is really, really busy. So we're gonna have a guest host every week. I've got one. Oh no, that's the week after next. I got one good one lined up for the week after next. You guys are gonna like him. So for next week, I think it's gonna be Thomas if you're listening, and somebody else. I don't know who else yet. Maybe Christine, maybe Galena, maybe Elizabeth, maybe a few other people. But if you would like to be a guest host, and if okay, the job requirement is real steep. You have to first be able to put up with me. Secondly, you have to be able to make me look good, which is a very hard job. I mean, it really is. But if you think that you can do those two things and you want to guest host on the show, send me a DM on LinkedIn and let's talk.
You guys won't regret it.
She says that now.
Yeah.
You get the story ahead of time. You get to do research on it.
Well, you do have the best audience, so
Yeah.
Man, ain't that the truth? And every time I turn around, it is growing. It is like, you guys, I've said this before, but we've got people in Germany, France, Portugal, Spain, South Africa, Nigeria, parts of India, all throughout Southeast Asia. Did I say Germany? The UK, can't forget about the UK, Canada, the US, occasionally Mexico, and then occasionally Colombia. It's like Colombia comes in and out every few weeks. I look at the stats and I'm like, whoa, I never thought that little old me with the microphone. Who'd have thunk it? Like, this is
That's
insane.
awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Who'd have thunk it? And that's why I bring good people on, because I feel like we're doing good stuff here. And I feel like I should have people who I think are good people on, spreading the good word about our profession, because my goodness, what better profession could you ever be in?
Right?
Just saying. I mean, and some of you have heard my story where I've said audit saved my life, and I'm not kidding. Just doing what I do, saved my life. I should have turned out a little bit different based on, statistics, environment, that kind of stuff. So, anyway, that's enough of my rambling for one day. So, anything else, guys?
No.
All right.
It's a conversation today. Thank you.
Yeah. So, guys, thank you for tuning in for episode number 108, Fuel for Thought. Here's what I'm going to ask you all to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to us, if it's on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google. Oh, I found out that Stitcher is closing. For anybody who uses Stitcher as their podcasting platform, they're closing. Wherever you listen to us, go give us a 5-star rating. I won't accept anything less. Tell the people why. Better yet, say this exactly. We love the Friday Fraudster. 5 stars. And that's it.
I'm doing it right now. Can I do it? Question. Can I give it 5 stars if it's the podcast that I happen to be on?
Well, it's okay. They don't do episode by episode. It's just the podcast as a whole. So we're covered there, You can even write in my objective and independent review of this podcast.
Oh, that's funny.
All right. Enough jokes aside. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Happy Friday, everyone.
Bye.